Novak Djokovic is set to be detained on Saturday after the Australian government cancelled his visa for a second time. The tennis star will appeal the decision over the weekend in the hopes of avoiding deportation. The British Prime Minister's office has apologised to Queen Elizabeth over two rule-breaking late-night parties that happened in Downing Street just before her husband's funeral. At the time, Britain was in a period of national mourning and also under COVID restrictions. NATO has condemned a major cyber attack on a number of Ukrainian government ministry websites and says it will sign an agreement to enhance cyber cooperation with the country. It's not clear who was behind the hacks. Virginia Giuffre, who's bringing a civil case against Prince Andrew for sexual assault, says she wants to show the rich and powerful are not above the law.
The United Nations Human Rights Agency says airstrikes this month have killed at least 108 civilians in the Tigray area of Ethiopia. Japan reports North Korea test-fired a missile on Friday, one day after the United States placed additional restrictions on the North for its weapons activities. In Britain, Prince Andrew loses his royal support and military links after a legal case against him over sex abuse continued in the U.S. And in India, thousands of Hindus bathe in the Ganges River in a yearly religious observance.
The Japanese government says North Korea has launched what's believed to have been a ballistic missile. This is the third time Pyongyang has fired a projectile this year. The Defense Ministry made the announcement Friday afternoon. Officials say the projectile likely fell into the sea outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. The government has lodged a protest with North Korea through diplomatic channels in Beijing. The South Korean military said the North had fired two projectiles believed to be short-range ballistic missiles on Friday. North Korea launched what are believed to be ballistic missiles from the northern province of Chagan on January 5th and Tuesday. Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Matsuno Hirokazu said the launches threaten regional peace.
North Korea's actions, including repeated ballistic missile launches, threaten the peace and security of Japan and the region. It's a serious issue for the international community.
The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command issued a statement on the incident, saying the U.S. commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea and Japan remains ironclad. Now to the coronavirus situation here in Japan. More than 20,000 new infections were confirmed across the nation on Friday. The surge in cases attributed to the Omicron variant is spurring authorities to consider how to maintain social and economic activity. It's the first time in over 4 months the daily tally has exceeded 20,000. The record daily total of almost 26,000 was set last August. 221 people across Japan are in serious condition, 96 more than Thursday. Tokyo reported more than 4,000 new cases. The figure in the capital has increased by about 1,000 for 3 days in a row. The southern prefecture of Okinawa has also been hit hard. Officials there confirmed nearly 1,600 cases on Friday. The rapid spread has affected many medical and essential workers there. One of the personnel at this fire station tested positive. 6 of his colleagues were judged to be close contacts and have to isolate. To cover their absence, the other firefighters now have to work 24 hours every other day instead of once every 3 days.
We must maintain our capability to respond to emergencies at all costs. I know it's hard, but I'm asking the crews to hang in there.
The government decided on Friday to shorten the isolation period for people who've been in close contact with an infected person. Until now, they've been required to isolate for 14 days. That's been cut to 10 days, and even less for essential workers. U.S. pharmaceutical firm Pfizer on Friday applied to Japanese authorities for approval of its Paxlovid antiviral COVID-19 tablets. Pfizer says clinical trials indicate Paxlovid reduces the risk of hospitalization or death by 89% when given to high-risk coronavirus patients within 3 days of symptoms appearing. The company says lab tests also showed the drug can suppress the replication of Omicron. If approved, Paxlovid would be the second oral drug available in the country. The Japanese government has an agreement to acquire enough to treat 2 million people. Now, experts are warning an explosive spread of COVID-19 could overwhelm local healthcare systems. They're calling on people to get booster vaccinations as soon as they're available. South Korea has extended its coronavirus business restrictions as the country also grapples with a surge in cases. The measures were set to expire on Sunday. Government officials say the restrictions will remain in place for another 3 weeks. The extended period includes the 5-day Lunar New Year holiday, which starts on January 29th. This means restaurants will continue to close by 9 p.m. Customers still have to present vaccine certificates or negative results to enter department stores and large supermarkets. But the government is raising its cap on private gatherings from 4 people to 6 amid public calls for the measure to be eased. The coronavirus restrictions were introduced in mid-December after the daily case total topped 7,000 for the first time. The figure now hovers between 3,000 and 5,000. Next, tennis star Novak Djokovic once again faces deportation from Australia after his visa was revoked for a second time. But his lawyers have appealed the decision as they fight to keep him in the country for next week's Australian Open. Immigration Minister Alex Hawke said in a statement on Friday he had canceled Djokovic's visa on health and good order grounds on the basis that it was in the public interest to do so. The Australian government is expected to deport Djokovic. Under the law, this would mean he is not allowed to enter the country for 3 years. But his lawyers have once again filed an appeal. The government first revoked Djokovic's visa when he arrived in Melbourne on January 5th for the Australian Open. His lawyers appealed, claiming he had been granted an exemption from mandatory vaccination rules because he had contracted the coronavirus in December. Djokovic was held in detention for several days before a judge overruled the decision. This opened the door for Djokovic to compete in the tournament. But Hawke used his ministerial authority to once again strip Djokovic of his visa. Djokovic had been practicing in Melbourne. He has won the Australian Open each of the past 3 years. China's total trade surged to an all-time high last year. Rising shipments to the United States and Europe, along with surging raw material costs, pushed the annual total over the $6 trillion mark for the first time ever. Total trade combines exports and imports. China's customs authorities said on Friday the figure for 2021 spiked 30% from the previous year. Exports jumped by around 30%. They were fueled by increased shipments of electronic devices and garments to the U.S. and Europe, where economic activity rebounded from the pandemic. Imports also rocketed about 30%. This was mainly due to higher prices of energy and raw materials. The export jump is bolstering China's economy, but the soaring raw material prices are weighing on businesses, contributing to an economic slowdown. The trade surplus with the United States grew by 25% from a year earlier to about $390 billion. The widening trade imbalance could be a source of further friction between the countries. Malaysia's foreign minister says some ASEAN members are raising concerns about the Cambodian Prime Minister's recent visit to Myanmar. They think Hun Sen should not have made the visit, as it could be seen as legitimizing Myanmar's military junta. Saifuddin Abdullah said on Thursday Hun Sen should have consulted other ASEAN leaders on such an important issue because Cambodia is currently chairing the association. He added the Prime Minister did not achieve anything with the visit. Hun Sen was in Myanmar last week to meet with the country's military leader, Min Aung Hlaing. This was the first such visit by a head of government to Myanmar since last year's coup. ASEAN excluded the junta leader from its annual summit, citing his failure to implement its 5-point consensus to stop violence and start inclusive dialogue. On Wednesday, Cambodia announced ASEAN's foreign ministerial meeting, scheduled to be held next week, has been postponed. Observers say differences among members over Myanmar may be behind the delay. Hun Sen had expressed his intention to hold meetings with all member nations present. Malaysia's foreign minister stressed his country's position any Myanmar representation should be non-political unless there's clear progress on ASEAN's consensus. In other news, the Taliban have announced their first budget for Afghanistan since returning to power last August. But it's uncertain how the Islamist group will secure the financial sources. The group's spokesperson on Thursday said on Twitter, the budget covers the first quarter of this year. It amounts to about $508 million. Local media report most of the budget will be used for infrastructure projects and salaries for government workers who've been unpaid since the takeover. But the Taliban are faced with a fragile fiscal base. A majority of Afghanistan's national budget used to depend on international assistance. Such aid has been suspended, and the country's overseas assets also remain frozen. Professor Tanaka Koichiro of Japan's Keio University, who's an expert on the region, says it may be infeasible to implement the budget. He notes the announced budget is an attempt by the Taliban to show they have the power to raise revenue, as they're likely on the brink of falling apart without funds. Moving to the weather, people in parts of the eastern and southern United States are bracing for a potent winter storm. Our meteorologist Jonathan O explains how it may impact the region in our World Weather Report.
Hello, we've been talking about the weather that's been impacting the northwestern areas of the United States, but now we have that same low pressure system moving toward the east and eventually making its way down toward the south, and that's going to bring a lot of changes for those in the southern and eastern areas of the United States. We're talking about some snow that's headed as far south as the Carolinas. North Carolina may be seeing some snow, and then that can be extending all the way up into portions of the mid-Atlantic states. I mean, look at the forecast here for the next 48 hours, snow expected through the Midwest down toward the south, and again, maybe seeing some snow into portions as far south as the Carolinas and even into Tennessee. New York looking at some snow coming up on Sunday, D.C. as well. Chicago going through the snow for Friday and Saturday. Atlanta may not see snow, but it's going to be a lot colder, so be on the lookout for that because we're looking at temperatures really dropping off. Meanwhile, as we look at what's happening across East Asia, high pressure is now pushing toward the east and moving its way toward Japan. Japan has been dealing with a decent amount of snow in the northern areas, and that's going to be slowly wrapping up as we head into the weekend. Hokkaido may still be stuck with a little bit more in terms of snow, but otherwise that snow machine will be turning off for just a bit as we head toward the weekend. Meanwhile, maybe seeing some showers developing into the southern areas of China. Let's get a closer look here, looking at that snow possibility as we go through overnight hours into Saturday, but then it all starts to disappear, and we should be seeing things calming down as we head toward the weekend. So, snow expected into Sapporo on Saturday. Tokyo, Osaka, and Fukuoka looking at highs around 10 degrees. Now, before we go, let's take a look at some video. This is something that's nice for this time of year on the shore of Lake Biwa in Shiga Prefecture. Beautiful yellow flowers called Kanzaki Hanana are in full bloom, the early blooming field mustard. And about 12,000 flowers are planted in this area. People enjoying watching the combination of the mustard flowers and snow-covered Hira Mountains, and it can be seen until late February. Hope you have a wonderful weekend wherever you are.